I'm following up my last interlude video with a full-fledged BLU review. I kind of rambled a bit on that one. My apologies. I'm a little rusty after a couple of days of not really creating any new content. So I'm aiming ere this night doth wane to create a backlog and accumulate a few that I can post and stagger them over the next few days. Give me some time to finish with the finish my little self-imposed quarantine, which I'm not sure what day of this is of the quarantine, but I do know I'm at T minus 4 days roughly till I return to retail world, and I'm not looking forward to it. It's one of the reasons I needed this time. So I didn't just need the time away from the job, the day job, to do my own stuff, to concentrate in on myself and try to heal some and try to cope with some of this intense emotion I've been grappling with. But I also literally needed a break from that job. This is the longest I've gone without working at this job in over a year and a half, I believe, almost a year and a half since I acquired the job. I've always worked. The most time I think I'd ever had out was like 5 days in a row, and that was partially because I got really sick in February with a sinus infection. Then I've had some weeks where I have missed work on and off with intermittent issues to where I'd be out, say, 3, 4, 5 days in a row, just the way the days landed, but never 7 days in a row, and never, never 2 weeks, which is where I'm almost at now, I think. So this will be a rare and probably the final vacation I have of this nature indefinitely. I don't know what kind of vacation you can call it. I haven't really been doing anything exciting, but I do want to keep manufacturing the content. So, long intro out of the way, I'm kind of debating over which of these blues to talk about today. I might just snatch one at random, but I would say the one that I have definitely been into the longest of all of these, I watched on Christmas Eve. So I guess it was my Christmas Eve movie. Maybe it will be my official Christmas Eve movie every year. It's Liquid Sky. It's the Blu-ray put out by Vinegar Syndrome. And I believe this was released in early 2017, possibly early 2018. I remember it was the first part of a year. But anyway, here's some inside stuff. And I was very happy to get it. I wasn't collecting. See, there's one of those antiquated DVDs. They're so 20th century. And then over here, the Blu-ray. Liquid Sky, man. So my personal feelings about and encounters with Liquid Sky and interpretations of Liquid Sky. First saw Liquid Sky, first heard of it when it was new. I was a kid, and my parents would watch Siskel and Ebert at the movies every week. And they would put me onto a lot of cool movies, movies that I didn't really explore until years later, some of them. But it was always interesting. It piqued my interest. It kind of planted some seeds. Because during that point in my life, I was not a cinephile for sure. I was mainly about the comics and literature and heavy into music, kind of transitioning from comics being my main obsession to music being my main obsession. Film had not become so yet. I was less interested in movies than I had been when I was a little kid, which of course then I was really interested in horror and genre films. And my parents went to the movies more often, but by the 80s we were broke, and I was getting sick of watching television in general. The only thing I kept up with was soap operas. I actually gave my mother my TV back, the one in my room, the small black and white TV. I said, "You can have it. I've got a new stereo now, so forget this." This is all during, the same kind of era. But anyway, they talked about this film on there, and as usual, I think Ebert liked it better than Siskel. Ebert tended to like the more far out things more than Siskel, and I guess that would be appropriate for a guy who wrote wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which is one of the more incredible films ever made. I'll definitely cover it, toss it into one of my Criterion um, rants one day because I have the Criterion edition, and that's a movie that's been with me a long time and meant a lot to me. It's not in my top 25, say, anymore, but it was for a number of years. Liquid Sky, yeah, I was just intrigued by it. I didn't really know anything about new wave music or really not much of anything about electronic music. I definitely didn't know about any kind of avant-garde filmmaking. And this movie kind of seemed to be very weird, but slightly more accessible than some of the weird stuff I bumbled upon at that point in my life. So I wasn't quite ready for it, but it was one of the earlier ones I embraced, albeit a few years later. So a few years later, I watched it, rented it with an ex-girlfriend of mine. We would rent movies every couple of weeks and go to her house and watch them. And Liquid Sky had intrigued me, and I can't remember where we rented it from, whether it be Blockbuster or a kind of a mom and pop video store that dotted the landscape back then. But I loved it. It was to me, it was humorous. I mean, part of me was kind of laughing at it because I didn't get everything in it, and then part of me was laughing kind of with it because there were things that resonated, and then part of me wasn't laughing at all. I was just kind of pondering the moods of it. It seemed so dry, deadpan in its humor, but also like it was saying something, and I thought that visually and musically, I wasn't as into those styles. I was starting to veer into strong interest in those kind of styles of fashion and things of that nature, and production design, those kind of looks. Music, I wasn't quite, there with a lot of the new wave and electronic, but actually this same girlfriend got me into a lot of that stuff and kind of was a gateway drug for that, and also alternative rock like The Cure and things of that nature. But I enjoyed it. I liked it more than my then girlfriend, and I thought she would dig it a lot more. But then it was a few years before I saw it again. I rented it, and I can't remember if I rented it when I was at the place I moved to when I moved out of my parents, or if I rented it at my next place, which was my own place I had for about 10 years. But in either of those cases, I did see it on videotape at some point. I think I watched it with a friend of mine named Shannon, and he liked it, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then, eventually when I began collecting videotapes, just a few years after that, I didn't seek it out. It was on my long list of ones to probably purchase, but I didn't seek it out per se. And at some point, early in the DVD era, it was one of the earlier DVDs I bought, and I don't think it was on a brand that was particularly like a big studio or anything. I didn't think it had the distribution it had on videotape. So I did buy the DVD, and I watched it periodically over the years. It was one that I kept revisiting as a favorite. So, early in my Blu-ray collecting, when I heard that it was going to be released on Blu-ray through Vinegar Syndrome, I was very excited. I didn't buy that many Blu-rays back then. I was budgeting very frugally back then. I hope sometimes that the me from that era would come here and give the modern me some more advice on doing that again. As far as Blu-ray collecting, which I've stopped now, since I've been doing these videos, I've stopped doing it due to finances. But this one I'm happy that I got. I got it. I pre-ordered it. I got it when it first came out. It came in the mail, a day of release, and it's pretty much a treasure. if anybody doesn't know, or maybe a lot of people don't know what Liquid Sky is, what it's about, I'll try to sum it up. It's it's a, as we used to say in school, it's a trip, and it is indeed. So here we have something set in the early 1980s when it came out, and you have this kind of cross section of subcultures in New York, and it's kind of post Warholian, kind of new wavy, kind of post punk, and there's a lot of emphasis on crazy fashion, a lot of emphasis on electronic music, and a lot of emphasis on drugs, and to a lesser extent, sex. And what you find is a lot of these people in this particular culture depicted here are very parasitic individuals. They're kind of feeding off each other and abusing each other, and there's a lot of men who are easily triggered to resort to rape, and drugs doesn't help the scenario. Our main character, Margaret, played by Anne Carlisle, who co-wrote the script, she also is a drug addict, but she's more in control than a lot of these characters. She's kind of detached to an extent. She's kind of experiencing things, but not letting things hurt her. And this manifests several times when something unpleasant will happen to her, and someone will treat her horribly, and she'll be like, "You're nothing. You're nobody. Forget, this isn't happening. Just do it. It doesn't matter." And she can take her mind somewhere else, and that's kind of what she's yearning for. And she finds that in one of the oddest places you would imagine. There's a very small paper plate sized flying saucer that has come into our atmosphere and is perched on one of these skyscrapers, and is kind of sensing things in the area. We never see the creature in it. It's got to be a small creature, but we do see it from its POV, and it's very cool, like very pastel colored negative film effect. And she nicknames this thing Indian because he comes to her assistance, maybe not deliberately, but she is being raped, and he sends these little glass, she calls them glass arrows, right into the middle of the brain of the perpetrator. And this happens to her twice. There's a lot of exploitative people in this scene. A lot of people who just want to abuse Margaret. It's really tragic because I like Margaret. She's a really incredible character, and but that a lot of this is key to the point of the movie, the themes of the movie. So she nicknames it Indian after the glass arrows, and she thinks it's kind of her savior. It's actually saving her from these forceful situations, not imposing one upon her. And I guess in a way she kind of falls in love with it from afar being several yards over across the street. But she wants it to visit her, and of course it's just kind of sitting there. There's a German scientist who he reminds me a lot of at times of Werner Herzog, the younger Werner Herzog. I'm not sure why. His accent is similar, but not exactly like it. I forgot his character or the actor, but he's kind of this middle-aged, befuddled German scientist who's come over to America, and he's tracking down the incidences of this particular extraterrestrial craft. And basically, it's homed in on the pleasure centers of the brain. So someone who is beginning to hit the ecstatic level with a narcotic drug, or someone who is right on the verge, the cusp of having an orgasm, releases the same kind of energy, and this being feeds off it essentially. And the glass arrows, I guess, were its kind of orgasm. But at Margaret's, Margaret implores it, not knowing that it's going to hear her or anything, to stop festooning her apartment with all these dead bodies. So he begins zapping them. Indian, begins zapping them out of existence, and she's very happy about that. He's a helpful guy to have around, and basically, more people try to abuse her and mess with her, but they meet untimely ends thanks to Indian. Margaret has a girlfriend, and Her girlfriend is played by Paula E. Shepherd, who only had one other major genre role, and I guess the genre role is as I'm just observing some of this here. Um, the genre role was in Communion or Alice Sweet Alice, which also had Brooke Shields, a very young Brooke Shields, which that's kind of a cult horror film. I used to have it on tape. I've never upgraded it. It's nice. I mean, one day I wouldn't mind having it, but I did have the. I think I had the DVD and sold it quite a while back. Anchor Bay had put it out, or maybe that was just the videotape. They put out the videotape as well. But anyway, in that one, she's a little girl who, young girl. She was playing a character younger than she really was. I think she was probably in her late teens, playing an early teen character. Uh, Kind of like maybe psycho, maybe engaged in some murderous activity. Um, in this one, she's definitely psycho. However, she's incredibly entertaining. She's harsh and cruel, so she's abusive to Margaret too, like verbally, and she's really kind of verbally abusive to everyone. And she always speaks in this kind of just hyper attenuated slang word salad that explodes out of her mouth. And she's very kind of a punk rock purist in that she mocks hippies and mocks yuppies and but she like mocks everything. She's like a total nihilist, and she also performs electronic music in the nearby club, and her music is pretty amazing. I mean, it's very stark and minimal. Her main track that she recites, that she performs, is called "Me and My Rhythm Box," which is basically her in this rhythm box. Well, it's like an electronic box, kind of like a portable audio generator of some kind that she's got strapped to her hip that she's manipulating and making do all these sequences while she recites this bizarre incantatory screed into her microphone. And you know, it's a sight to behold. I think it's aged pretty well, actually. I think when I first saw this movie, I was like, oh, this is some token weird new wave music, but now I see it almost as it was pretty much of its time, of the underground of its time. I mean, it wasn't terribly far off from Throbbing Gristle or things like that, which, were ascendant at that time. When this movie came out, Psychic TV was just starting, Throbbing Gristle had fragmented. Cabaret Voltaire was on the scene, and you had bands that were playing like noise, white noise kind of music with bizarre lyrics recited over them. Was a style that played by these bands, and then those bands played that kind of during the punk and immediate post-punk era, and then by the 80s, some of those bands were fading arguably into synth pop. And of course, one of the early industrial bands that did that and reached the most commercial success was Depeche Mode. But they too started in this same vein as Throbbing Gristle, Clock DVA, and Cabaret Voltaire, all of whom stayed in electronic music. Well, the members of Throbbing Gristle kind of went in different directions. This should all be reserved for an On Music episode on the origins of industrial music, I guess. But my point is to give you a little context that now that the years have gone by and I've heard music genuinely of that era of the underground and come to appreciate it, and some of it even really love, like Throbbing Gristle and Clock DVA, I'm a huge fan of. It really is of that era, and it's authentically of that era. So now I watch the movie as like a kind of a time trip, kind of a time capsule, tripping back there and experiencing New York and this subculture with these fashion models and musicians and gay cruisers and drug junkies, all kind of congregating in this area. This club is kind of like the locus point. And the second locus point of the activity is Margaret's own apartment, because Margaret's girl, played by Paula, she's a very popular drug dealer in the area, And so she gets everybody hooked up. So into this comes our other major character, which is called Jimmy. Jimmy is this androgynous kind of Bowie-esque kind of guy, or self-styled Bowie-esque guy, and he's extremely deadpan, mannered, affected in his speech. He is also played by Anne Carlisle, and so there's a lot of good pre-motion capture effects here going on with the two of them in frame together. And Jimmy is he's just a mean bitch. I'm just going to lay it on the line. He really is. And he mocks Margaret constantly. He hits her. And finally, she calls his bluff. And thanks to her alien friend, is able to exact some payback on young Jimmy. And there's an interesting scene where the two of them are conjugating and, so to speak, and of course, we have to shift the camera angles and everything to where it's Anne Carlisle's playing both characters, and there's a body double. But yeah, I mean, the energy in this movie it's kind of carried along. The electronic music is very rhythmic. There's a pulse to it that keeps it moving through the whole film. And by the end of the movie, Anne Carlisle's achieved quite a bit by playing these two characters and writing their dialogue. Slava Zuckerman was the director. He's not American, and but him and Anne teamed up and created this. And to me, it's just a treasure. I mean, it's like one of my favorite science fiction movies. It's one of my favorite kind of new wavy movies from that era, because there were a few good ones that came out, new wave and post-punk films, either fiction films like Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, also awesome, Breaking Glass, also awesome, or documentaries. There's a bunch of those. This one, I think, just is a great snapshot of that time and that mood, while also being an interesting science fiction story. And you have the scene and all of its madness, and then you have the German professor who's kind of on the outside of the scene, the adult of the movie, and he's kind of giving you the exposition about the alien and all the science fiction aspects. So you have the best of several worlds, and the scene where he meets Paula is really hilarious, because of course she tells him off and assumes he's this kind of person when he's trying to help her understand that this alien thing might be inadvertently killing people by absorbing that special substance, that orgasmic substance from their brain. So anyway, Liquid Sky, what are some extras? Well, it looks like there's a lot. There's a commentary track with Zuckerman, the director. He does a special introduction. He does an interview, and Carlisle does an interview. There's a 50-minute making of documentary that was new for 2017, so it was new for this disc, and a 2017 Alamo Draft House screening in Yonkers, New York, with Slava Zuckerman, Anne Carlisle, and Clive Smith, the co-composer of the music. So I really need to kind of watch those latter two things. I haven't watched them since I first acquired this. There's outtakes, there's alternate openings, behind the scenes footage, trailers, still gallery, the usual feast that you come to expect from the better of these boutique video companies. So yeah, I highly recommend this. It's still in print, still easily available, not very expensive, and I think it's one of the most unique films in Vinegar Syndrome's catalog. Quite a lot of their catalog is exploitation films and adult films, erotic films, and really, really low budget exploitation films from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, horror and other genres. And of course, they have the quite a good blaxploitation selection. They have they put out the official Blu-rays of Rudy Ray Moore's 4 notable films. Of those, I own the Dolomite, Vinegar Syndrome. So this one is really a different kind of animal in a lot of ways, but I do see the crossover between subcultures. As far as people who were into those other kind of movies would see this movie and like it, just as I saw it. It went in a video store, and I first saw it in a video store. It was kind of marketed alongside the bad cinema, the underground cinema, the weird stuff, the experimental stuff. Because I mean, it is surely a low budget film, but um, I think stylistically and script wise, and just the whole mood, I think it's so consistent and well done that it kind of transcends that groove of filmmaking. It's kind of its own thing. I think that's part of its staying power. So, Liquid Sky, and I'm going to go ahead and try to throw in another review here. Yeah, why not? So, I watched this High Rise by Ben Wheatley. Yes, that's Loki himself on the cover, Tom Hiddleston, that handsome devil. And then there's the back. I don't know if there's anything exciting inside. Not really. High Rise is from a J.G. Ballard novel. It was from the very first J.G. Ballard novels that I ever read, and it blew me away. I mean, he was ostensibly and largely a science fiction, speculative fiction writer, but some of his books really don't have many overt science fiction elements, as in they have science, but not the fiction part. They could happen in today's world, but they have this touch of irony and satire. It's very dark. It really hits a nerve. Some of them are very indicative of the time they were written and are very almost prophetic uh, of the of our society, and some dark undertones, like the Atrocity Exhibition is one I think of particularly, and its rantings about Ronald Reagan are quite interesting. I'm not a Reagan fan, so I had no problem with that. Ballard is British, by the way, and he was kind of one of the new wave of science fiction. I guess some other people in that would Norman Spinrad, Michael Moorcock. He was a little earlier than these guys, but his work peaked at that period was Philip Jose Farmer, who's my favorite fiction writer, and one of my favorite nonfiction writers. Though with him, it's hard to tell, the line blurs between the two. High Rise was basically, these when it was written, I guess in the 70s, it was contemporary, and it's a lot of rich and elitist people who have managed to populate this cutting edge architecture high rise that's just rising up through the sky like a skyscraper, and it has all these amenities, some of which they're not futuristic, maybe in a way futuristic for the time the book was written, but not to us. But I mean, things that you would not think were in a high rise apartment building. In other words, they've created their own atmospheres, their own environments, like gardens, places where they ride horses, schools. There's all kinds of things going on, and it kind of reminds me of the vertical version of Snowpiercer, that's the horizontal. So everybody in the train, they had these different, societies or cultures or areas, and they were duplicating what they'd had in the outside world. Same with Fiddler's Green and Land of the Dead by Romero. So, and that was also a skyscraper. So possibly Romero was a little influenced by High Rise. They are contemporaries in a sense, and I think a couple of his movies, like The Crazies, do have a Ballardian flavor to them. Other movies I think of that do are Shivers by Cronenberg, absolutely, and Night of the Hunted by Jean Rollin. They're kind of the Ballard books that weren't, but they were movies. His work itself, as far as being adapted into film, the only popular one is Empire of the Sun, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring a very young Christian Bale, and it's a child actor. And I've never seen Empire of the Sun. I read some of the book, and it was okay. It just wasn't to my taste. It was different than Ballard's other stuff. It was very unapologetically autobiographical, and it was just things that I personally couldn't relate to that much. The writing was still top notch, but it didn't have the effect of his other work that I've read, which was several short stories and a few novels. Empire of the Sun was acclaimed, and I guess that's Ballard was still not considered really bankable by Hollywood. His stuff seemed impossible to adapt, especially his, you know, widely regarded as his masterpiece, Crash. By the 90s, Crash had gone out of print for a little while, and it was hard to find the book. And then Cronenberg created his adaptation, which this month, December, is coming out on Blu-ray on Criterion. So I'm looking forward to getting that sometime in the future. And High Rise being adapted kind of surprised me. And of course, at first I was like, no, this is going to suck. But, you know, Crash was really great, but it wasn't as good as the book. I know, cliche. It wasn't. And it missed a lot of things in the book that were amazing, but a lot of things really couldn't be adapted. And some things had to be, by necessity, updated and conflated in order to make it smoother as a screenplay. I think it was overall a successful adaptation. I think Cronenberg's material is a bit too, I think its austerity suits Ballard. It did not suit William Burroughs. I'm not a fan of Naked Lunch and the movie. I am a fan of the book. Huge Burroughs fan, but I think his approach was really too formalist and realistic for Burroughs material. Burroughs material should have been much more anarchic and underground in its flavor, just more unfettered and free form. I think writing a mainstream script with a mainstream plot over Naked Lunch or using Naked Lunch is big artistic error. But I know a lot of people love that movie, and so feel free to disagree. But I'm of the dissenting view on that. And Cronenberg is among my favorites. I talked about Shivers here a few episodes back. High Rise, the movie. So the one good thing about it is it is set during the time it was written. So the fashions and the technology and such are of the 1970s. And there's also two different versions of ABBA SOS, I guess popular during that time, that are in the movie. The music is interesting. I've only seen one other Ben Wheatley film that was A Field in England, which is kind of like part of the contemporary folk horror movement. It's kind of like a British period piece, except horrifically psychedelic at the same time. And I enjoyed that one. It was very unique. High Rise is totally different. He uses name stars in this, like Luke Evans, Sienna Miller, and of course Tom Hiddleston as the star. And the most notable co-star is Jeremy Irons. And this is the kind of film that, hearkening once again to the parallels with Ballard and Cronenberg, it's almost the kind of film that if it had been made, back in the day, Jeremy Irons would be playing the character that Tom Hiddleston is playing. But he's a little too old. But he plays the architect of this massive high-rise, stretching to the sky, and all forms of decadence and pleasure are available there, for these rich people. Hiddleston plays a doctor, and Lang is ostensibly the narrator of the film. There's really not any narration except in the beginning and the end, so that's good. It doesn't clutter up the movie with voiceovers, which I'm not a big fan of in general. Sometimes can be done well. But the lines that he says in the voiceover at the beginning and end are both highly evocative of the book, High Rise, some of it almost verbatim. And they're powerful beginning and ending, so why change them, Hiddleston is really good in this. This was the first film I saw of him not playing Loki. I did see a couple of other pieces he was in, including a mini series that I'm forgetting the name of. Someone will probably be able to tell me. That was pretty good. He's a fine actor, and I think he's deserving of his following. Not because I think Loki is sexy or any of that stuff, but he is genuinely funny and genuinely can be genuinely serious. He's got class, and he just pulls it off in this movie. I really enjoyed him as this character. Sometimes you're sympathizing with this character, and sometimes you're really not. Um, the journey of this character is that he moves into this place, and not long after he moves in, and not really because of him, but some people probably in the high rise might think so in their paranoid worldview. Shortly after he moves in, things begin going a little crazy, and technology begins breaking down. The relations between the tenants begins becoming more aggressive. Uh, Eventually, the whole thing is just sliding into madness. They're like abandoned or stranded in this high rise with everything anyone could ever want, and now they're fighting among themselves, and now things are going crazy. There's orgies and violence and destruction, and it's like the apocalypse inside this one building. Because for a while you see how they go out into the world to their careers, but after a while they stop going out. They never leave the place. I mean, they've got groceries, and they've got a whole grocery store there. And Hiddleston's Lang character kind of navigates through this, and I really dig him. He's in this. He's really great, and Jeremy Irons is excellent. Also, I mean, this couldn't have worked without Jeremy Irons in some role or another. Um, and the older Jeremy Irons, it's been hard, I think, to find roles for him because he's not like ancient elderly, but he's also not that eternally young to middle aged stylish guy with panache they used to cast all the time, who played like the tormented lover. Now he's kind of in another area of his life. But this was astute casting, and even though at times it was awkward, I think overall his casting as Ozymandias in the Watchmen television series was brilliant. I think he's really good in that. That's the kind of role that if he was playing Ozymandias in the 1970s, you get the 1970s Jeremy Irons easily could slot into that part. Much better than Matthew Good, who really is not good as an actor, who played the character in the Watchmen film. So High Rise, yeah, I mean, it's great. It captures that era. It captures the madness of the book, and it captures basically, human nature is going to out no matter where you are, and they collectively descend into madness, because of the internecine conflicts going on there. It's like you're putting a whole bunch of people in a big pressure cooker and expecting things not to explode, and it's not realistic. They start to explode, and these people start to revert to savagery and barbarism. Ironically, in this place that's supposed to be the next frontier of advanced living. So that's kind of the whole gist of the book, and that's really the gist of the movie. And I think the movie translated it incredibly well. I dig it. So it's good to quit while I'm ahead, before I drone on too much longer. It's good to be back in the harness doing these. Starting to feel a little looser and a little more focused. When I reviewed my Christmas film, which I believe was originally was going to be Marketa Lazarova, but that was too dense for me to undertake in my current state and really do justice to. So instead, I chose. You guys will have to remind me what movie I chose. I can't even remember what I reviewed on Christmas. I know it was a long movie. I remember it was long. It wasn't The Tin Drum. The Tin Drum I watched yesterday. I may or may not talk about that in the future. But in any case, when I did my last BLU review, I was, I don't know, kind of in a keyed up state. I think it came out better than I thought it did, but at the same time, the digressions were even more egregious than usual. I think I knew I was a bit unfocused, scattered, a bit nervous, and now I'm kind of gradually kind of trying to tie together these loose ends of my psyche so that I can communicate something to you guys and that has some kind of value, no matter what it's about, whether it's about my mundane existence or my work or the things that I am into. I want to connect through this, and it's really the only way I currently have. It's the kind of the next frontier beyond social media, and though it isn't, in a way, it is social media. Um, so I'm very happy with the way the channel's turning out, even though I'm not happy with all my installments. I'm going to keep toughing it out. I will be doing more pieces that are uh, probably around this length or longer, and more pieces that I use notes and structures to get across certain points, because some things just completely fly out the window once I get on these tangents. And I don't know if it's frustrating for people to watch them or what, but I'm telling you head on that I can understand if it's frustrating, and I apologize. It's just my brain is a bit scattered, and I've got a lot of info in there, and it's kind of all fighting to get out, and it doesn't always come forth in the most erudite fashion. The one I recorded just prior to this, the arbitrary interlude, uh, it was like that. I felt I was staggering over my words and what I was trying to say. The mood I'm in now, though, I could probably review 5 more Blu-rays and be on point, but I don't want to wear myself or you guys out, and so I'm going to beg out and beg off and bow out until next time. So there will be some kind of video from me next time. So, okay, I'm remembering here. So subscribe, a little round thing with my picture, and then square will probably be up here, will be the last BLU review you can link to, the one just prior to this, and the bottom will either be a link to the entire playlist of BLU review, or once I get it made, a link to the next installment. So I think right now this is number 35. So you'll have a link to 34 and 36, and a subscription. Please subscribe. Please thumbs up. I need all the help I can get out here, man. Anyway, take care.